Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome, folks. Today, the Hungry Gamer is back with another mini review, and today we're talking about Crisis at Steamfall from BD Games and designed by Tom Stasiak. Now, this is a game that I've actually had for quite some time. I was a backer on the original campaign, and this was last year is when it arrived, at some point last year. But when it arrived, the expansion wasn't with it yet. They shipped separately, and it was, I don't know, several months before the expansion showed up. And the designer was like super clear. He's like, look, we made some mistakes with the original game. It wasn't right. And this expansion fixes all of those things. And if you haven't played before, please don't play the game until you get the expansion. And I was like, okay. And it finally arrived, and I set it up once. I started to play, but I made the mistake of trying to play pretty much the most complicated of all the scenarios first, and I couldn't figure it out. And I was trying to do a solo, and I just put it away. I took it home with me as the only like hobby style game for Christmas, and played it a whole bunch, and really started to dig this game. And it just really kind of stuck in my head and took me back to the reason why I backed it in the first place. And for that, and because of that, I actually reached out and I said, you know, I've played this game a few times now, and I'm digging it, and I'm upset with myself that I did not get the miniatures, because it comes with standees with really cool art on them, and for the most part, I don't get miniatures when they are add-ons. I'll use the standees and I'll be fine. But this one, the characters are very interesting. The minis are cool, and I really was digging the game. I'm kind of spoiling the end of this. And so I reached out and said, can I buy them? And he was kind enough to just send them to me. And so I could use them, and you'll see them in the little video that's going to start appearing in just a few minutes. In any event, Crisis at Steamfall is this Euro-style action selection game that takes place in Steamfall, which is a steampunk land, town, whatever. And as you can guess, there's a crisis sometimes. And you're moving around these different tiles, and you're collecting resources. You are interacting with citizens, either with charm or with the threat of violence, so they'll tell you what they want and you can help them out. You're going to these secret rooms, and in these secret rooms there are prizes that you can find or in-game storing conditions that you can find. And you're doing things to earn points. And in 2 of the 4 scenarios, whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to win. These are the competitive scenarios. However, there is also 2 cooperative scenarios. One of them is the crisis at Steamfall, and you're trying to stop this crisis, and you're working together to do that. And then the other one is called the incredible invention, and you're kind of working together to make this amazing invention. And when you're playing in the cooperative mode, it kind of has that crisis management, pandemic style game where you're trying to make sure you do all the right things and put out different fires and work together to get the resources you need to accomplish the goal over the course of 3 rounds. Now, the way it's going to work, though, is you're going to have an action selection little chart, a la Scythe type thing. And you'll put your disc on there each round, and you get 3 turns per round, 3 rounds per game, so 9 activations is what you're going to have. And you get to fire off all the abilities that are down below that particular column. And you can either fire off a column once or twice, depending on where it is. And there's another column that happens at the end of every full round. So every 3 turns, you get to fire those things off as well. And you start with some things in that column, but you can spend your resources, your insight that you're going to pick up all over the board, to add more things to that column and kind of build it out how you want as you're going through the game. And at the same time, you also have these very wacky steampunk inventions that you can do. And you'll be building those out, which will then give you abilities that you can use as well. However, you have to have those things be charged, and they charge a little bit at the end of each round. But for the most part, to use them, you have to charge them up, which means you're spending other resources, usually steam, but maybe one of those abilities in the columns that you fire off to charge them up. Now, all that sounds relatively simple, but here's the thing about it. I mentioned there's only 9 turns, 9 activations that you take, and there are 12 in the longer competitive version called Genesis. But here's the thing. Because you're activating so few times, every single resource is exceedingly tight. So if you're going to choose to use one of the things that you fire off, it means to then charge up your gadget that you've built. It means you're not doing something else. Because you have, as I said, 9 or 12 activations to do everything that you need to do. And I'm going to talk about this in my likes and quibs later, but I bring it up now because you need to understand that all of the resources are exceedingly tight in this game. And that's kind of going to help you understand kind of what's going on, and you've seen a little bit up there in the side. So right into it, what do I like about this game? The first thing I'm going to say is I love the look of it. The minis are great, the art is great, I love the wackiness of it. The last competitive game I played, Original Dawn, built a banana gun. I had an auto sword that was in symbiosis, whatever that means, and was leaky. I had another relic I had, a special amazing relic, which was just a bundle of cables so you could share energy amongst everything. I mean, it's very, very clever, very, very strange in the best kind of way. Board art is good. There's different tiles, so even if you're playing max player count, you don't always have the same tiles out there. There's a whole bunch of different secret rooms that go around the side, which so you never know what kind of objectives you're going to have. All of that, I think, is really, really clever, especially because depending on which type of scenario you're playing, you can have different cards that are in the pool of cards that you can actually have. Works really, really well. The next thing that I think is fantastic is each of the characters completely unique with how their board setup is at the beginning. In other words, the actions in the columns, but they also have completely unique abilities. Not such a huge deal, but completely unique abilities. However, they also have completely unique abilities depending on which scenario you are playing. So you can play the 4 different scenarios as Marcus, and Marcus will have 4 different sets of abilities. All the characters have that, and I think that is just awesome. Just awesome. Next thing I'm going to say is, this is one of the few games that I feel truly does cooperative and competitive very well. I think if you like the core mechanics of the game, then you are going to like the cooperative and the competitive. It's really, really well done. There are very few games that I feel do both equally well, and this is one of them. I think when you're playing the cooperative, it's a good challenge. It does feel winnable, and I think I've won the bulk of the times I've played a cooperative scenario, but it's not easy. We just, I think, just pulled it off and worked together really well. And the competitive is good. It feels like it's competitive the whole game, and usually it comes down to the end. Even if somebody wins by a good amount, you always feel like you're within striking distance the whole time. Now, that's going to bring me to the one that I really want to highlight, and that is this Genesis-style scenario that I mentioned. And this is the most complicated one. It's also the most interesting, and this is how I actually started trying to play this, and I couldn't figure it out. But now when I finally went back to it, it works really well, I think. So what happens is, this game is 12 activations instead of just 9, but as you go through, there's a little story that your character is going through. It has a little journal, and as you flip through the cards of the journal, you're getting different abilities. And you start right away, you have a choice of 1 or 2 different abilities you can take. And then you have an objective for that first 3 activations, that first round. If you succeed, you flip that card over, and you have another ability. And then you have another 2 choices for the next round of which way does my character kind of go with this. Again, with an objective, if you succeed, you flip that card over, you get an ability. And if at any point you fail, you're done, you just get the last ability that's there, and it's kind of a, well, you didn't save the town, necessarily. You didn't accomplish your destiny. But, here's a thing that you can do, and you now have an ability that will be useful, so you can still potentially win this game. And I think it's really brilliant. I mean, it's really, really brilliant. And along with that, it has different AIs for all the different characters that you could play against as you're going through. And that does allow you to play the Genesis scenario solo, and it's pretty darn challenging. And so I think that also is something that is great, because as I said, you can't just jump right in and play the Genesis scenario. You have to do the other competitive and cooperatives first with other people. They're just not going to follow. So all of that, I think, is really good. And then I would have to, of course, highlight the way you're building up your columns for the actions that you're taking, every ability that fires off, I think is really inspired. I mean, it is really, really cool. It's very clever. It's very satisfying as you're building it up. And it makes the resources even tighter in the game because a lot of times you need that resource, insight, to accomplish various objectives that'll get you points out on the board. But you also have to use that insight to improve your actions that you can pick, add more tokens to the columns that you're firing off, which means from the very beginning of the game, you're faced with really hard choices of what do I do? And I really do like that. Again, because resources are so tight. Again, usually you only have 9 activations. So if you're not getting a point this round, then you aren't getting a point and you're going to have to make that up later. But there's not a lot of later to make things up. So really, really clever. I really do like that. So what are my quibbles with the game? Well, the first one is this game came with a master rulebook, and for me, I still had a hard time grasping everything. The rules are all in there, but for whatever reason, I had a hard time kind of following how things work in some places. It's not a bad rule book, but for me, the organization just was tough for me. And I've talked to a few other people who have it, and they don't feel that way at all. So that might just be a me thing. The next thing I will say is, it's not an easy game to grasp. It isn't, and because everything is so tight, the first time or two that you play, especially at the beginning of the game, you just feel like you can't do anything. You feel like I've done nothing. I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to get that done. I can't do anything. And you have to kind of work through that. And I played a few times before I was like, no, you can do something. I can actually do a lot. I just got to stick with it, and I got to work this and do this and do this. It's just challenging. Puzzle you kind of have to solve to be able to then solve the puzzle of the game, which might be more than you want to deal with. And then that kind of leads into what I've already mentioned before. The resources are intensely tight the entire game. You will never feel like you have everything that you need. You will never feel like you can do everything that you want to do. It's just not going to happen. And if you screw up a turn, you've just lost almost 10% of your activations. A little more, a little less, depending on which version you're playing. And that might be really frustrating. Again, it's a great challenge, but that might not be a good feeling for you, and you just kind of have to understand that. So there you have it, folks. That is Crisis at Steamfall Genesis. It took me a long time to kind of work through this game enough to feel like I could review it. But I'm really glad I did. This game really is unique. It looks great. And I just think it does some very, very cool things. It just needs a few plays before you realize the gem that this game is. I really dig it. And it's one that I'm not going to be able to get everybody to play all the time, but I'm always going to be looking to try to get people to play it because I think the competitive is very, very satisfying, especially that Genesis mode once you get people there to do it. And the cooperative is very satisfying. It's the crisis management, pandemic style game, but it doesn't feel like most of those types of games in the way that you're doing things. Just all very, very clever. And this is one that I actually pretty highly recommend if you've gone through my quibbles there. Well, if you like Euro style games, and if you've gone through my quibbles there and like, okay, no, I'm into that, then I think you'll really enjoy this game. On the other hand, if the tightness of those resources and things that I mentioned sound like a nightmare to you, you will really not like this game. Like, I don't think there are many people, after they've played a couple of times, are going to be like, it's fine. I think you're either really going to enjoy it, or you're really not going to like it. And I think you really got to focus on, are those things that I think are going to be challenges for some people, are those things that are going to put you off? Because if they are, then there's other games out there. But if not, this is one you should seek out because it's unique, and I think it's got something kind of special about it. So as always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.